wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Dan.
And this is the podcast where we apply ancient philosophy to modern life. And if you've been listening to recent episodes, you know we have been talking about the Stoic paradoxes. Last week we talked about Paradox 1, and this week we'll look at Cicero's second Stoic paradox, virtue is sufficient for happiness. So, virtue is sufficient for a happy life. What do you think about that, listeners? Is being temperate, just, prudent, and having fortitude or courage, are these things sufficient for living well, for having what we might be able to call a happy life? Remember what we're really saying here is you could live a happy life despite what society may tell you, without being rich, without being well known, without having a 1,000 followers or 1,000,000 likes. You could live well and on your last day of life say, well, that was worth it. That was a good life. I'm happy with the way I spent my time on this earth. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. So remember, we're talking about Cicero here. Was it Marcus Tullius Cicero, something like that, his full name?
Oh my goodness, I would have to go look it up.
That's okay. But he was a politician, a lawyer, a well-known orator, I should say. But he was also very much into a philosophy. He wasn't necessarily a Stoic himself, but he admired Stoicism and often spoke about it, mostly from a position of admiration. One of his works discusses what we call the Stoic paradoxes, which sort of are these ideas that when you first hear them might sound like they can't be quite right, but then you dig deeper and go, oh, maybe that's true. And so once again, this week, is virtue sufficient for living a happy life?
No man who is wholly consistent within himself and who places all his interest in himself alone can be otherwise than completely happy. But the man whose every hope, scheme, and design depends upon fortune, such a man can have no certainty, can possess nothing assured to him as destined to continue for a single day. If you have any such man in your power, you may terrify him by threats of death or exile. But neither the outrages of fortune nor the injuries of enemies can shatter me. Do you threaten me with death, which is separating me from mankind? Or with exile, which is removing me from the wicked? Death is dreadful to the man whose all is extinguished with his life, but not to him whose glory can never die. Exile is terrible to those who have, as it were, a circumscribed habitation, but not to those who look upon the whole globe as one city. Cicero, Paradoxa Stoicorum, number 2.
Well, there's a lot of philosophy packed into that paragraph, Dan.
He even works in cosmopolitanism.
I know, right there at the end, the whole world is my city or my country, as has been we have read in the past. So this is that idea that we hear throughout Stoicism, and of course they didn't invent this idea necessarily, but they really ran with it. This idea that if you have something that can be taken away, and that's where you put your happiness, is on your wealth, on your reputation, etc., then you're always going to be worried about it. You're going to be terrified to lose it. And so if having something makes you unhappy, then maybe we need to look elsewhere for happiness. And also this idea that back then exile was a big deal. You'd be sent away. And a lot of people were terrified by that as well, because you don't have any reputation if you have no power over anyone and you have no friends and you're kind of off on your own on an island somewhere. Some felt that was a very terrible thing. In fact, Seneca was exiled twice, I believe. One other thing I'll add before I let Dan add his thoughts here is that he says, going back in the paragraph here, that no one's really happy whose design depends upon fortune. And a lot of times they speak of Fortuna as this like goddess who distributes things randomly, like someone throwing meat to dogs, and we're all snapping for these treats that are raining down randomly. And if you ever see a statue of Fortune, she's blindfolded, kind of like Lady Justice, and she's holding a cornucopia and distributing gold coins and things from it. But it's random whether you catch a coin or you catch the plague. It's as they say, it rains on the just and the unjust alike. And Fortune was kind of a random chance sort of figure, this personification of randomness when it comes to good and bad luck. And
It's a good way to explain why the wicked have good things, or what the common person, the masses view to be good things,
exactly
like wealth and fame and high regard and things like that.
Yeah, this is why it's not like you do well and honor the gods and you're automatically well off. There's this element of blind chance to it, which they personified in this goddess form.
So I want to point out that possessing virtue makes you self-sufficient, because no one can take virtue away from you, and you will be happy because happiness is a byproduct of a life well lived. And with virtue, you will lead a life well lived, because virtue requires and spurs you to behave appropriately. So the road to genuine happiness does not lie in the possession of externals, which are subject to fortune, but rather in the cultivation of the virtues.
But I'd point out that don't get too caught up on the idea of being self-sufficient as meaning in your normal
an island?
life. Yeah.
Right. Like, no. Part of cultivating justice requires you to be in relation to other humans. By self-sufficient, I mean that you don't depend on anything outside of yourself for happiness.
Right. Yeah, but we know that a lot of people kind of make a hard turn on that this idea and kind of veer out of stoicism, thinking that they're super stoics or something.
I'm an island in the storm-tossed sea with waves crashing against me, and nothing can make me feel anything.
And I don't need you, and I'm not going to help you either. Yeah.
I'm going to do you a favor by not helping you because I'm making you strong.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have to watch that line. Yeah, there's something to being that rock that the seas toss against. That's part the challenges you face, but you might rely on help from others to face those challenges, and you might help others through those challenges as well.
Right. And the reason you cultivate your self-sufficiency is so that you can be a better neighbor and a better citizen and better able to help other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Most people think that if they possess sufficient externals, that they will be happy, and possessing externals will lead them to the good life. But externals are uncertain and subject to fortune. So instead of happiness, what they will feel is desire and greed and lust for what they hope to gain. And if they succeed in gaining that external, fear and anxiety of losing that external, and finally sadness when they do lose the external. And so this mistaken prioritization of externals makes them subject to their externals instead of vice versa. So they don't own the mansion owns them.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this last time, but I always mess up the quote. But one of my favorite Seneca quotes is, when you reach what you thought was the top rung of the ladder, you'll find it was just another step. There's always more, and you'll want more and want to climb higher and higher. And you'll never say, I have enough now. If you don't watch it and govern yourself, you'll forever reach for more and more, and then be afraid that you're going to slip off that ladder and fall.
Especially if you did corrupt things to get where you are.
Oh, yeah.
Because you will fear that other people are going to do similarly dastardly things to you, especially if you observe your peers doing these things, because, people tend to keep company with like people.
Right. So live with virtue, folks. Come on. I will now read Cicero, Paradoxa Stoicorum 2. It is a bit wordy and strange, but I'll come back with a bit of a Steve translation. Thy lusts torment thee day and night, thou art upon the rack. For whom that thou possesses is not sufficient, and who art ever trembling, lest even that should not continue. The consciousness of thy misdeeds tortures thee. The terrors of the laws and the dread of justice appall thee. No man can be happy if he is wicked, foolish, or indolent. So no man can be wretched if he is virtuous, brave, and wise. Glorious is the life of the man whose virtues and practice are praiseworthy. We are to look upon whatever is worthy of praise as at once happy, prosperous, and desirable. Cicero, Paradoxus Stoicorum 2. All right, that first sentence is a bit of a mouthful. So, another way to think about it is a person ruled by their desires is tormented constantly. Day and night, they feel like they're stretched on the rack, being tortured, in a torture chamber, in a dungeon, because nothing they have ever feels like enough. And they live in fear of even losing that. So, we as we said, you can fear, even if you have a little bit, you can fear losing it and feel tortured. I felt this myself in weird ways. I really want to have, like, I bought a little boat when I was in Arkansas and it had an engine on it. But then, and I thought it was cool to have this boat, and I used it a couple of times, but not enough to warrant owning it. But then I was tortured by the fact that I had to maintain the engine, and if I didn't do it right, then I'd have a junk engine, and then I'd never be able to sell it. And then you're worried about, why do I have this? What do I have to pay to maintain this thing? And it's just like a constant weight on your shoulders, just owning too much stuff and having to worry about it. And the same way, being worried about being sent to exile, or of losing your money, of losing your job, of losing your followers online. These are things that lead to unhappiness. And as he said, what leads to unhappiness includes things that are, wicked, and foolish, those sorts of things. But if you are brave, wise, and have other virtues, then you're, by the Stoic definitions, almost instantly happy. It won't be happy necessarily in the sense of like the modern word happiness, but you will live a well lived and worthwhile life. If you are living a virtuous life, taking virtuous actions, then you will have lived well.
Right. Not happiness in the sense of euphoria, but more happiness in the sense of contentment or a fulfilled life.
Yeah, which is, I believe, what they were going for in the United States here in the founding documents when they talked about the pursuit of happiness, for example. It wasn't the pursuit of ecstasy, it was the pursuit of something meaningful and well lived. So, what do you think, Dan? Do you think virtue is sufficient for happiness?
Yes, I do.
Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be behind these microphones, would we?
It is one of the foundational tenets of Stoicism, so it would be difficult to cast it aside and still view yourself to be a member of the school.
If we live well, if we follow virtue, and we're striving for excellence in the way we live by living prudently, having practical wisdom that helps us to know what is worth pursuing and what is worth avoiding and which things are indifferent. If we have courage to do what needs to be done, and the fortitude to live through harsh conditions, like Epictetus says, bear and forbear, or as I like to call it, persist and resist. We are there for our neighbors, and we have self-control so we don't overindulge, and we control ourselves and take care of ourselves. Then we do that consistently, day by day. We make excellence of living a habit. You do that for a day and you've done great things. And you do that for, if you're lucky enough to live another year or a decade or 30 years or 100 years, you will have lived quite a useful, what we would call a happy life in that case. So think about what you can do. If you're journaling, what could you do to live more virtuously tomorrow than you did today? Where'd you fail? What could you improve on? Just incremental improvements is all all we can hope for at a time. But move in that direction, and perhaps you'll see some changes in your attitude towards this crazy thing we call life. Any closing thoughts, Dan?
Just like last time, of course, we've been talking pretty much solely about Cicero, but I thought it might be nice to bring in Seneca to discuss the relative difference in value between virtue versus externals. None of those who have been raised to a loftier height by riches and honors is really great. Why then does he seem great to you? It is because you are measuring the pedestal along with the man. A dwarf is not tall, though he stand upon a mountain top. A colossal statue will still be tall, though you place it in a well. This is the error under which we labor. This is the reason we are imposed upon. We value no man at what he is, but add to the man himself the trappings in which he is clothed. But when you wish to inquire into a man's true worth, and to know what manner of man he is, look at him when he is naked. Make him lay aside his inherited estate, his titles, and the other deceptions of fortune. Let him even strip off his body. Consider his soul, its quality and its stature, and thus learn whether its greatness is borrowed or its own. Seneca, letter 76.
Damn, Seneca. Just lay it out there, man.
He usually does.
So get out there and live virtuously and call it like it is. Try to live well and not be enamored by boasting, by false grandeur, but be impressed. Pay attention to those around you who have the qualities that you actually admire and want to see in yourself when you look in the mirror. And don't forget to seize the day.
Carpe diem!
Seize the carp.